She wasn't breaking the law. She wasn't causing a scene. She was simply living her life until the people sworn to protect her turned her into a target of mockery. They didn't see her strength, her dignity, or her truth. All they saw was the color of her skin. But what they didn't know would leave them humiliated and the world shocked. How could a moment of cruelty expose such a powerful truth about racism in America? It was a quiet morning in the city. Dressed in a simple suit, she blended in with the crowd, just another face moving through the streets. To most, she looked like any other professional woman heading to her day's work. What few knew was that she carried years of dedication, discipline, and a title that commanded the highest respect. But in that moment, she wasn't seen for her accomplishments, only for her skin. As she stepped closer to a group of uniformed officers, the stage was set for a confrontation that would reveal far more than anyone expected. She approached the steps with calm confidence, the kind that only comes from years of discipline and purpose. But to the officers standing nearby, she wasn't a professional, or even a person worthy of respect. She was simply a black woman walking through their space, and that was enough to draw their sneers. The first laugh was quiet, but it didn't take long before the others joined in. They mocked her clothes, her stride, even the way she carried herself. The taunts weren't loud enough for everyone on the street to notice, but they were sharp enough to sting. Each remark carried the weight of generations, reducing her identity to a cruel stereotype. She didn't respond, not yet. She had learned long ago that silence was often her sharpest weapon. But the officers weren't done. Their laughter grew bolder, their comments dripping with disrespect. One leaned in as if daring her to acknowledge them. Another crossed his arms, smirking, waiting for her to flinch. To them, she was powerless. To them, she was just another target, someone to belittle before moving on with their day. The air grew heavy. Passers-by glanced quickly, then looked away, unwilling to interfere. This was how racism thrived. In silence, in complicity, in the space between what was right and what was easy. Each second dragged, the humiliation pressing down harder, threatening to crush the dignity she carried with her. Still, she kept her head high. Every step she took was deliberate, every movement a reminder that she refused to be broken by their mockery. But inside, the tension tightened like a coil. How much longer could she endure their cruelty? How much louder would their laughter grow before it snapped into something worse? One officer muttered a final insult, loud enough for everyone around to hear. The words cut deep, meant to strip her of every ounce of authority. A hush followed, as if the city itself was waiting to see what would happen next. The officers stood tall, smug in their belief that they had reduced her to nothing more than the object of their jokes. But they were wrong, dead wrong. What came next would not only silence their laughter, it would expose just how fragile their power truly was. The laughter had reached its peak, sharp, cutting, echoing louder than the traffic around them. One officer stepped forward, blocking her path as if daring her to move. His smirk carried the weight of arrogance, the kind that comes from unchecked power. Another officer leaned against the railing, arms folded, watching like a spectator at a cruel game. In that moment, the world seemed to shrink. It wasn't just her against a group of men in uniform. It was her against the system they represented. The air thickened, heavy with the unspoken history of every black woman who had been dismissed, disrespected, and diminished. Their mockery wasn't just about her, it was about centuries of prejudice, condensed into a few painful minutes. For a split second, she considered walking away, letting their ignorance speak for itself. But why should she? Why should her silence be mistaken for weakness? She took a deep breath, her heart steady, her gaze unshaken. Then, without raising her voice, without a single tremor of fear, she reached into her bag. The officers stiffened, their laughter faltering, their smirks replaced by unease. Slowly, she pulled out a badge. Not just any badge, the seal of a federal judge, gleaming under the morning sun. The shift was immediate. Their chuckles died in their throats. The confidence drained from their faces, replaced by the wide-eyed panic of men who realized they had crossed a line too dangerous to erase. The power dynamic flipped in an instant. They had mocked her. They had humiliated her. And now the truth stood before them, undeniable, unshakable. The silence that followed was deafening. The same crowd that had once looked away now stared, waiting to see what would happen next. And in that charged, breathless moment, one question lingered in the air. What happens when those who abuse power are forced to face the truth? The officers stood frozen, their arrogance shattered in an instant. The badge in her hand wasn't just a symbol of authority, it was proof that their cruelty had been built on nothing but ignorance and prejudice. For the first time that morning, their voices were silent. The same mouths that had laughed at her now struggled to form words. She didn't shout. She didn't demand an apology. She didn't need to. Her presence alone was enough. With quiet strength, she walked past them, leaving the weight of their shame behind. But the damage had already been done. The humiliation, the assumptions, the way they reduced her to nothing more than her skin color, it revealed something deeper, something far bigger than a single encounter. Because this wasn't just her story. It was the story of countless black women and men who face judgment before they ever speak, who carry the burden of proving their worth in a world that should already see it. The officers may have been embarrassed that day, but embarrassment is not justice. Shame is not change, and silence is not enough. The real question lingers long after the moment passes. How many times will this story repeat itself before those in power finally learn? Every act of mockery, every dismissal, every assumption, it chips away at trust, at dignity, at humanity itself. And until society confronts this truth, the cycle continues. She walked away with her head held high, but the world should not walk away from what happened. Because this isn't just a story about a federal judge, it's a story about us, about what we allow, what we ignore, and what we're willing to change. So, the question remains, will we keep looking away, or will we finally stand up and listen?